Story 1. The Mind That Shouldn't Exist. I'm Carter, and this is the story of the most terrifying experience of my life. A road trip that turned into a nightmare, one that haunts me to this day. It all started with a simple idea. My college buddies and I, who hadn't seen each other in years, decided to reunite for an epic road trip. There was Ben, the jokester with a heart of gold, Lisa, the adventurous spirit always up for anything, and Haley, the calm, rational one who kept us all grounded. We all needed a break from our routine lives and thought a trip through the Mojave Desert would be the perfect escape. We rented a caravan, a classic Airstream, packed it with supplies, and set off from Los Angeles, excited for the journey ahead. Our first few days were perfect. We drove through scenic routes, camped under the stars, and reminisced about old times. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed the freedom of the open road. It felt like we were invincible, like nothing could go wrong. On the fourth evening, as we were driving along a particularly desolate stretch of road, we noticed a strange glow in the distance. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen, a pulsating light that seemed to beckon us. Naturally, our curiosity got the best of us. "Let's check it out," Ben said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Lisa and I were all for it, but Haley hesitated. "I don't know, guys. It looks weird. Maybe we should just stick to our route." "Come on, Haley," I urged. "What's the worst that could happen? We'll just take a quick look." Reluctantly, Haley agreed, and we turned the caravan towards the light. As we got closer, we realized it was coming from an old, abandoned mine shaft. The entrance was partially collapsed, but the light streamed through the cracks, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "This place is creepy," Lisa muttered, but she was smiling, the thrill of adventure in her eyes. We parked the caravan and approached the mine. The air grew colder, and an oppressive silence enveloped us. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly. The light inside the mine intensified, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Despite a sense of unease, we decided to venture inside, hoping to find something interesting. As we stepped into the mine, the temperature dropped even further. Our flashlights flickered, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing off the walls. We wandered deeper, mesmerized by the glowing symbols and the mysterious light. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the ground. The light became blinding, forcing us to shield our eyes. When it subsided, we found ourselves in complete darkness. Our flashlights had died, and panic set in. "Everyone, stay close!" I shouted, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "We need to find our way back." We huddled together, feeling our way along the walls. Hours seemed to pass as we stumbled through the tunnels, our fear growing with each step. The mine seemed to have transformed into an endless maze, and our sense of direction was completely lost. "I can't take this anymore," Lisa cried. "We're going to die in here." "No, we're not," Haley said firmly. "We just need to stay calm and stick together." But as the hours dragged on, our supplies dwindled and desperation set in. One by one, my friends started disappearing without a trace. First, it was Ben. We were walking in a single file, and when we turned a corner, he was just gone. We called out for him, searched frantically, but there was no sign of him. Next, Lisa vanished. One moment she was right behind me, and the next, her flashlight beam was gone. I heard her scream, but it was cut off abruptly. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the mine was claiming us one by one. Finally, it was just Haley and me. We were exhausted, terrified, and on the brink of collapse. We stumbled upon what seemed to be a large chamber, and to our horror, we saw the source of the glow, a massive pulsating crystal embedded in the rock. "What is this place?" Haley whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, "but we need to get out of here." Suddenly, the ground shook again, and a blinding light filled the chamber. I reached out for Haley, but my hand grasped empty air. She was gone. I was alone. Desperation fueled my steps as I fled through the tunnels, my mind unraveling with fear. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands and knees, but I didn't stop. I had to get out. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light ahead. Summoning the last of my strength, I ran towards it and burst out into the open desert. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, the blazing sun beating down on me. I don't know how long I lay there before a passing car found me. They took me to the nearest town, where I was treated for dehydration and shock. I tried to explain what had happened, but my story sounded insane even to me. The authorities launched an extensive search for my friends, but they found no trace of the mine or my friends. The area I described didn't exist on any map, and the glowing mine seemed to have vanished without a trace. I returned home, but my life was never the same. The memories of that night haunted me. The faces of my friends lost in the darkness. To this day, I don't know what really happened in that mine, but I've heard rumors of other disappearances, other travelers who followed the glowing light and never returned.
Story 2. The Silent Sands. My name is Jose, and this is the story of how my family and I experienced something so terrifying in the Nevada desert that it changed our lives forever. My wife Maria and our 2 kids, Lucas and Isabella, were excited about the trip we had planned. We were on our way to visit Maria's sister in Reno, but I thought it would be fun to take a detour through the desert. It was supposed to be a scenic route, a chance to experience the vast, untouched beauty of the Nevada desert. We had a reliable SUV, plenty of water, and a GPS system to guide us. It seemed like the perfect family adventure. The kids were thrilled. Lucas, our adventurous 10-year-old, was eager to explore the unknown. Isabella, at 8, had her sketchbook ready to capture the beauty of the landscape. Maria and I were looking forward to some quality family time, away from the hustle and bustle of our daily lives in Las Vegas. As we drove deeper into the desert, the scenery was breathtaking. The endless dunes and the wide-open sky made us feel like we were the only people on Earth. Everything was perfect until the GPS began to malfunction. It started giving us strange directions, leading us off the main road. Trusting the device, we followed its guidance, assuming it knew a shortcut. Hours passed and the sun began to set. We hadn't seen another car in miles. The GPS led us to a remote sandy expanse, and suddenly, our SUV stalled. No amount of coaxing could get it to start again. Stranded and with no cell signal, we decided to wait for help. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature dropped, and an unsettling silence enveloped us. We decided to camp in the SUV for the night, hoping a passing vehicle would spot us in the morning. The kids were scared, but Maria and I did our best to comfort them. As night fell, we began to hear strange whispers carried by the wind. At first we thought it was just the wind playing tricks on us, but the whispers grew louder and more distinct. "Do you hear that?" Maria asked, her eyes wide with fear. I nodded, trying to stay calm for the kids. "It's probably just the wind. Let's try to get some sleep." But sleep didn't come easy. The whispers continued, filling the night with an eerie, haunting presence. Lucas and Isabella huddled close to us, their eyes wide with fear. We spent the night in a state of uneasy vigilance, hoping the whispers would stop with the dawn. Morning came, but instead of relief, we were greeted with a new horror. Our SUV had sunk deeper into the sand, almost as if the desert itself was swallowing it. Panic set in as we realized we were truly isolated. We decided to trek back toward the direction we came, hoping to find help. As we walked, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to be calling our names. Suddenly, Lucas vanished. One moment he was walking beside me, and the next, he was gone without a trace. "Lucas!" Maria screamed, frantically searching the area, but there was no sign of him. Next, Isabella disappeared. She had been holding Maria's hand, and in an instant she was gone. Maria fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to find help." We continued walking, our hearts heavy with fear and despair. Then Maria vanished. One moment she was right beside me, and the next I was alone in the vast desert. Desperation fueled my steps as I stumbled through the desert, my mind unraveling with fear. I called out for my family, but the only response was the eerie, whispering wind. I was completely alone, lost in an endless sea of sand. Days seemed to blur together. I was dehydrated, exhausted, and terrified. The whispers never ceased, filling my mind with a sense of impending doom. I fell to my knees, convinced that I would die alone in the desert, my family lost forever. Then I saw a faint light on the horizon. Summoning the last of my strength, I stumbled toward it. It was a passing car. The driver, an older man named Frank, found me barely conscious and took me to the nearest town. In the town, I was treated for severe dehydration and shock. I tried to explain what had happened, but my story sounded insane. The authorities launched a search for my family, but they found no trace of them. The area I described was a known desert, but there was no sign of our SUV or my family. I returned home to Las Vegas, broken and haunted by the memories of that night. Weeks passed, and I tried to move on, but the mystery of my family's disappearance gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I felt like I was losing my mind. Then one day, weeks after the incident, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Lucas standing there, looking just as he had the day he disappeared. "Dad," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Is it really you?" I pulled him into my arms, my heart bursting with relief and joy. "Lucas, where have you been? How did you get here?" Before he could answer, Maria and Isabella appeared behind him. They looked tired and frightened, but they were alive. We sat down together, each of us taking turns to share our stories. Lucas had woken up alone in a different part of the desert, with no memory of how he got there. He had wandered for days before being found by a hiker. Isabella's experience was similar. She woke up miles away, terrified and alone, and was rescued by a group of campers. Maria had the most harrowing tale. She had been trapped in a cave, hearing the whispers grow louder until she was finally found by a search party. As we shared our stories, we realized that each of us had experienced the same eerie whispers, the same sense of being watched. It was as if the desert itself had come alive, playing tricks on our minds and separating us. The whispers had led us away from each other, each of us believing the others had vanished. But the most chilling part was still to come. Lucas revealed that during his time alone, he had seen something in the desert, a shadowy figure that seemed to watch him from a distance. Isabella had seen it too, a dark shape that followed her, but always stayed just out of sight. Maria described the same figure, lurking in the cave where she was trapped. We all fell silent, the horror of our experiences sinking in. What had we encountered in the desert? What was the source of the whispers and the shadowy figure? None of us had answers, but one thing was clear. We had survived something beyond explanation. In the weeks that followed, we tried to return to our normal lives, but the memories of the desert haunted us. We couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched, that the whispers might start again at any moment. One evening, as we were sitting together in the living room, the lights flickered, the temperature dropped, and a familiar whisper filled the air. Jose, Maria, Lucas, Isabella. We froze, our hearts pounding with fear. The shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the room, its dark form blending with the shadows. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched us with an eerie stillness. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving us in stunned silence. To this day, we don't know what we encountered in the desert. The whispers and the shadowy figure remain a mystery, a terrifying reminder of our ordeal. We've moved on as best we can, but the memory of that night lingers, a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that lurk in the silent sands.
Story 3. The Phantom Highway. My name is John, and I've been a truck driver for over 20 years, hauling loads through the Arizona desert. I've seen just about everything you can imagine on these long, lonely stretches of highway. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was a routine haul just like any other. I was driving my rig, a 2012 Peterbilt, loaded with electronics bound for Phoenix. The desert nights are usually peaceful, with the vast open sky and the hum of the engine keeping me company. But that night, something felt off. I started my journey from Flagstaff around 9 p.m., planning to reach Phoenix by early morning. The first few hours were uneventful. I listened to my favorite country station until it faded into static. Switching to my trusty playlist, I settled in for the long drive. As the miles rolled by, a strange unease settled over me. The desert seemed darker than usual. the stars obscured by a thin veil of clouds. The air felt thick, almost oppressive. Around midnight, I saw her, a figure standing by the side of the road, waving frantically. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. It was a young woman, looking distressed. Every instinct told me to keep driving, but something made me stop. I pulled over, and she approached my truck. "Thank you so much for stopping," she said, her voice trembling. "My car broke down a few miles back, and I need a ride to the nearest town." She looked to be in her mid-20s, with long dark hair and a pale complexion. Her clothes were modern, but something about her seemed out of place, like she belonged to another time. Despite my better judgment, I nodded and unlocked the door. "Hop in," I said. "I'm heading to Phoenix. There's a town about 30 miles ahead. I can drop you there." She climbed into the passenger seat and buckled up. As we started moving, an uncomfortable silence filled the truck. She stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I tried to make small talk, but she only responded with nods or single words. The uneasy feeling from earlier intensified. About 20 minutes later, she suddenly spoke. "Can you take a detour? There's a road up ahead that will get us to town faster." I hesitated. "I've been driving this route for years. I know the quickest way." "Please," she insisted, her eyes pleading. "I need to get there as soon as possible." Against my better judgment, I agreed. A few miles later, I saw the unmarked dirt road she had mentioned. I turned onto it, the truck bouncing along the uneven surface. The desert closed in around us, the sense of isolation growing with every mile. As we drove deeper into the desert, the woman's demeanor grew more unsettling. She seemed to become more agitated, glancing around nervously. My own nerves were on edge. The dirt road was narrow and winding, and I started to doubt this decision. "I think we should turn back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't respond. When I glanced over at her, my heart nearly stopped. The passenger seat was empty. She was gone. The door hadn't opened, and there was no sign that anyone had been there. Panic surged through me, and I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, dust swirling in the headlights. I jumped out of the truck, flashlight in hand, and searched the surrounding desert. There was no trace of her, no footprints, nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Terrified, I scrambled back into the truck and turned it around, speeding back to the highway. My hands were shaking, and I could barely keep the truck on the road. When I finally reached the main highway, relief washed over me. I drove as fast as I could to the nearest town, a small place called Kingman. At the truck stop, I rushed inside and found a payphone to call the local authorities. An officer arrived shortly after, and I told him everything. He listened patiently, his expression grave. "You're not the first to report something like this," he said. "Over the years, we've had several truckers come in with similar stories. Always the same description: a young woman in distress, then disappearing without a trace." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who is she? What's happening out there?" The officer shook his head. "No one knows for sure. Some say it's the ghost of a woman who died in a car accident years ago. Others think it's something more sinister. All I can tell you is to be careful." I thanked him and went back to my truck, my mind racing. I didn't sleep that night, too shaken by the encounter. As dawn broke, I continued my journey to Phoenix, the memory of the phantom passenger haunting my thoughts. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I shared my story with a few fellow truckers, and to my surprise, many had their own encounters to share. They spoke of strange lights in the sky, eerie figures on the roadside, and the same mysterious woman. One night, at a truck stop diner, an old-timer named Bill pulled me aside. "I heard about your experience," he said. "Happened to me too, years ago. Same woman, same road. She's been out there a long time." "Why does she appear?" I asked. "What does she want?" Bill shrugged. "Some say she's looking for help. Others think she's trying to lead us somewhere. But where and why? No one knows." Despite the fear, a part of me was intrigued. What was the truth behind the Phantom Highway? I started reading up on local legends and folklore, trying to piece together the mystery. The stories were varied and often contradictory, but one thing was clear: the desert was a place of strange occurrences and unresolved mysteries. One particularly unsettling account came from a journal I found in an old bookstore. It detailed a similar encounter from the 1950s with a young woman who led a traveler into the desert only to vanish. The writer described a feeling of being watched and a sense that something was trying to communicate with him. He never found any answers, and the journal ended abruptly. Months passed, and life returned to normal, but the memory of that night never left me. I continued driving my routes, always wary when passing through the desert. Every time I saw a figure by the roadside, my heart would skip a beat. One evening, as I was driving the same route, I saw her again. This time, she was standing at the exact spot where I had first picked her up. My blood ran cold, but I didn't stop. I drove past, watching her fade into the darkness in my rearview mirror. When I reached Phoenix, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The desert had shown me a glimpse of its secrets, but it still held many more. Perhaps someday I'd find the courage to seek out the truth. But for now, I was content to leave the Phantom Highway behind.